basically, I'm doing this YouTube channel. The whole idea is like, I want to, I was going through some crisis the last couple of years, and I felt like I want to try to give whatever I learned, and that's why I'm trying to conquer people that I feel like they know a lot. And I think there's a lot of that they don't know, people around Chicago that know a lot of stuff, you know? I mean, because it's like that, I mean, I think there is a lot of people that don't know, that there are people here in this town that know a lot, and I think you're one of them, okay? And I was
Well,
lucky.
thank you.
Yeah, I was lucky. Like I said, I was lucky to spend 2 years with you, and through the kids, I saw in and out a lot of stuff. So normally people are not lucky to kind of to
Right.
around. So anyway, so basically what I want to is, I wrote down a bunch of questions, and that I think they are important, and I would like you to answer. So that way, we put this video.
Sure. Sure.
That's basically still what it is, and
Okay.
you know what I mean. And it's all gonna be about tennis, maybe a little bit about business, but mainly tennis. Mainly tennis for parents, for
Got
kids,
it. Okay.
because like I told you, you coach somebody at a very high level, you develop a program. I still think that is, I sent a couple of kids 2 3 weeks ago to the club, because I think, when I look at it, the club that develops kids or try to get kids in a path to become a tennis player, I think it's you guys do it. Your system is going into that idea. Now we can agree with everything or not, doesn't matter. But I think there's a lot of really good things, and so basically,
Sure.
yeah, that's basically the whole idea. So anyway, I'm gonna say here. So I'm with Steve Wild here. He's coach Linda Wild, top 20 in the world. Coach Robbie Weiss, he was top 67 in the world. A great player. He also is coaching right now Jack Seeger, his grandson, which is doing really well, and also he owns 4 clubs. So, and he's been in the tennis industry for a long time. He was part of the USTA. So he has known the in and outs of tennis for a long time. And he's basically, I was lucky to work a couple of years with him, and picked his brain a lot. So I want some of the people that might get to listen to this learn a little bit about what is still philosophy. So Steve, I'm gonna fire you with questions, okay? So the first question that I wanted to,
Sure. All right. Let's go, baby. Hit
yeah.
me.
So the first question is, what do you think is the most important characteristic of a coach? What do you think? So you're a coach. What you really need, and this is whatever you think, huh?
Well, I think it's kind of twofold. I think I certainly a basic understanding of the game, but
Okay.
I think sometimes the basic understanding of the game takes on too great of a role. So I mean, if you don't have an understanding of the game, you're not going anyplace. So it's kind of a given. But if you think of a coach like a tennis player, you've got some players that might have a good serve, that might have a good return. Some guys don't miss a ball. I mean, so we all have different strengths and weaknesses, right? So I would say that a rudimentary knowledge of the game is a given. But then I would say that the ability to motivate and encourage people, I think is I mean, if you're talking about putting a player on the tour or developing a competitive player, it's that idea of encouragement. And if you think about the word encourage, the etymology of it, it's encore, which is in and heart. So the heart is the emotions and the feeling. And so what you're doing is you're putting heart in somebody, right? So it's a little bit like the cowardly lion was looking for his heart. So I think being able to encourage a player and get them to do something that they don't think they can do is huge. And then I would just say understanding the journey, because this thing is a journey, and I think the more you understand the journey of a player from little all the way through, I think is very helpful. And interestingly enough, there aren't many people that have done to take a player, from like ground zero all the way through. Usually what happens is they get to be a certain level, and then, the USTA takes them, or another coach takes them, or what have you. So I think understanding the journey is very important in the coaching process as well. And when I say the journey, it's not only the ups and downs of the career development, but it's also what does it take in order to be able to develop the skills to be able to get there. And so I think it's a whole lot less complex than a lot of people would like to make it, because at the end of the day, Simon Sinek wrote that book Outliers and talked about the 10,000 hours, right? And so I think, you've got to put your 10,000 hours in, but understanding the 80-20 principle, which is focusing on the 20% that's going to give you the 80%. And I think a lot of coaches, however well-intentioned, can find a whole lot of things that they can work on, but given the limited time, effort, and energy you have to spend on this, I think the really gifted coach can figure out the 20 that's going to give you the 80.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I like how you answered that, Steve. Very good. Very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, you can talk your way out of shit. You definitely can.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? So
that's right.
Now, the other question that I have for you: what do you think that make you successful or different as a coach? What was the thing that make you? I mean, you've been around for a long time. So and what do you think was the thing that make you?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I failed to answer that before. And what I was starting to say is that a rudimentary knowledge of the game is important, but piss and vinegar and energy that you're bringing to it trumps knowledge all day long. And so I think, the secret is as you age and as you develop more wisdom and more experience, you can't lose the energy and the enthusiasm you had as a 20-something coach, right? And so I think it's a little bit of a paradox, because when you get to be a certain age, you just get tired and lazy, right? But you know a lot of really great stuff, right? And then when you're young, you got piss and vinegar and energy, but you don't know shit, right? So and I think the other part of it is knowing what you don't know. There's, I think, particularly with a lot of young coaches today, I think a lot of them don't know what they don't know. And so I always wanted to listen to somebody that knew more than me. And even as a 19-year-old college student, I would make sure that I drove my college coach, George Lott, who was a world-class player in the 1930s, considered by many one of the best doubles players that ever played in the United States. And I would drive him to and from every match. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to suck this guy's brain clean. I wanted to know what he knew. So even as a young person, I was always kind of hanging out with older people because I wanted to know what they knew. And so oftentimes young people just hang out with young people, and young people don't know shit. So, that's it's pretty hard to continue to learn and grow. And I would say, sort of tangential to that is lifelong learning, right? So if you're a lifelong learner, I think that helps you as you continue through your path as a coach. And the other thing I'd say about that is that, and you and I know this very well because we had our rather let's say energetic conversations on the
Oh
court
yeah.
about different
Yes.
areas of the game, right?
Yes.
But I think if somebody comes along and they have a better idea than you, then and it's actually working in the real world, then I'm going to listen to it, right? If you really don't know what you're talking about, you can't defend your way of doing things logically, then I got no use for you, right? So in my life, I always looked at people who had been there, done it, got the T-shirt, because anybody can talk about it, but I wanted to learn from people that had actually done it, right? And so, but sometimes that innovation and that learning can come from where you least expect it. And this was very interesting, as we spent time together with my grandson, Will, you had much more relevant knowledge of clay court tennis than I did, because my clay court tennis was from the 1970s. And when my daughter Linda retired from the tour in 2000, I hadn't taught for probably 10 years, and I hadn't been around, competitive tennis tournaments in that long. And so when we were working together, I was having Will play more like I had Linda play, which is sort of top of the bounce and flat and really attacking the ball. And your idea was no, you gotta go sort of up at a 45-degree angle with that stroke and get that ball to spin and jump. And so that really turned me on to the rotation of the ball and the heaviness, which is something I always believed in back, even from Robbie Weiss's days in the 1980s. But the point that you made about the stroke going up at 45 degrees and really using that in today's game as a weapon really resonated with me. And so, I could say, well, okay, I've forgotten more than Javier knows, but I thought, no, wait a second. In this particular area of the game, he's got more relevant knowledge than I do. So I'm going to defer to him in that particular area. So again, I think you have to look at every interaction you have and say, well, does this guy may not have the right idea in terms of 3 or 4 other things, but they might be spot on in this one area. So again, I guess it's lifelong learning and looking for innovations in areas where you least expect it. Okay.
So Steve, I know I'm a scatter, so I'm gonna throw you the question.
Do whatever, man. Go hit me, baby.
So how would you define tennis? The game itself. What is tennis to you?
Well, certainly I'm a 30,000 foot guy, right? So I'm a big picture guy. So I would say tennis to me is a vehicle for personal development, because I think there are so many life lessons that you can learn from tennis. So first and foremost, it's a vehicle for personal development, and then it operates on a number of different levels. That's it's a game, and I would say, if you want to get a little more granular than that, I would say that it's got offense and defense, right? And I would say that it's a game that puts to be successful at the game. I think you have to take time away from your opponent, and you have to make fewer errors. So it's both of those things. So on a 30,000 foot level, I'd say it's about personal development, because you're out there by yourself. You can't run out the clock, and you've got to deal with all sorts of fears, injuries, tired, fatigue, and it's in many respects it gets to be a battle against yourself. and the degree to which you can push, not give up. And so if you ask me why should I play, I think it's because you build life lessons on the court. And I've had any number of my friends that have gone to top universities and played Division I sports. And I would ask them, I'd say, look, did you learn more on the playing fields or in the classroom? And to a T, they would tell me I learned more about life on the playing fields. And so, again, I think this is invaluable. And I'll also go so far as to say that, when I grew up, women's tennis was not as prevalent as it is today. And so I think particularly for young women, growing up in a sport like tennis is just phenomenal because of the intangible life lessons that you learn.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're working now with Jack, and before you were, and probably Jack is going kind of in a different stage. He's starting to become a little different, right? So how do you divide the stages of development? Are you the same with Jack between Jack was 6 and 9 or 10? Now, how would you divide? There is a division for you between the different stages in that process, or how would you divide that transition through the years? Do you think that there is let's put it this way. Do you think that there is a different Steve if you're 15? Is a different Steve if you're 20? Is a different?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, for 10? Sure. Yes. Yes.
Yes. What's different? You know what I mean?
I think what happens, well, first of all, each player is different, right?
Yes.
So as a coach, you have to make allowances for that individual personality, right? And so it's very interesting for Linda and Robbie. They both sort of grooved off of my energy, and they were more compliant. And so I could say, well, do this or do that, and it wasn't, they would push back if they had questions. But Jack is someone that pushes back a lot. So Jack is a dominant, sort of high energy, intense personality. So you can't talk to him as much as I could the other two, because he's so intense, he's doing his thing, and when you're talking to him while he's hitting, it starts screwing him up, right? So I think there's a difference in dealing with various temperaments of players, but I would say that at the younger ages, I'm much more concerned about technique and specifically I think this is really the wisdom of the ages, and that is, when Linda was young, from the time she was 12 till 17, 18, probably till the time she was on tour, we would always hit 100 balls down the middle of the court, 100 cross-court forehands, 100 cross-court backhands, 100 down one line, 100 down the other line, 100 with me at the net, 100 with her at the net. And that's just something we just did over and over and over again, because some players have a no miss mentality, others don't, but it's that grooving of the stroke and the rhythm of the linked system that I think you need to train. And so I think there's a lot more balls hit. There's a lot more emphasis on technique and skill building. And then, so for example, now Jack, I mean, every now and then he'll want me to feed him a few balls, but generally it's live ball. And again, most of the time I'm standing on the court next to him rather than on the other side of the net feeding or hitting, and just making little comments, as he's hitting. So the coaching becomes much more refined and sophisticated as they get a little bit older. And then the other thing is it's also a little bit more difficult as they get older, because a good coach knows when to shut up, right? Because what can happen is you can get in the way of the players' cycles, and it becomes very, very difficult for them. And I think I realized this when Linda was on the tour, and I had to stand next to her and learn to coach that way. But I'm a painfully mediocre skier, golfer, and bass guitar player. So I've had to take a lot of lessons myself. And so in taking lessons myself, it's sort of taught me, when to shut up and when to talk, is essentially. So I and as they're younger in their development, it's like you're talking nonstop, right? Because they just kind of need that feedback. And what you're really doing is you're starting with a picture in your mind's eye of what you want the stroke to look like, and then you're comparing it to what the player's doing, and you're constantly giving feedback and making him hit a lot of balls in order to be able to make those two pictures alike, right? Okay. But then as they get older, now there's a lot less in your face and constant talk, and more just let him hit. Okay, now there's a little bit of a break in the action. Now let me say something real quick and then go back to it. And even though I might see something again and again, I'm not going to keep pointing it out because I'm going to get in the way of the player's cycle. So it's a different type of a coaching as they get more advanced. Yeah.
All right. So Steve, also important, I think this one you will help parents. How do you think that it should be? Obviously, every family is different, but how would you manage the parent-player relationship? This one is a little bit.
I think this is really an important concept, because sometimes the lines start to cross. And again, I have a unique perspective because I spent so much time coaching my daughter and now my grandkids. So I was kind of both. And and a lot of people have said that the most difficult thing you can do is coach your child. And I know a lot of coaches that won't coach their kids. And then I know others that try to coach their kids, and it just becomes a problem. And so I think whether you're coaching your kid or coaching somebody else, it's important that you let the parent be the parent and the coach be the coach, right? So I don't want the parent. Now, if the parent has an idea and they want to talk to me about it, that's certainly fine. But if the parent doesn't believe that you know what you're doing and you're going to do what's best for the child, well, then they shouldn't be taken from you in the first place. So there's that bit of trust. But I was always very open with the parents. I didn't mind the parents sitting on the court because I wanted them to see what I was doing. And the more they saw what I was doing up close and personal, the better I looked. And so that was my approach to it. I know a lot of coaches don't want anything to do with the parents. They're crazy. They're this, they're that. But you got to remember, the parents are the one paying the bill, right? And so at the end of the day, I'm not going to be at war with this person. I'm going to make this person my friend and my ally if I want to work with this kid. And, back in the 80s, I had some of the toughest parents around, but I was able to deal with them because, I needed them on my side. But I let them be the parents, and then I'm the coach. And if the parent starts to come over onto my area, I'm going to say, hey, look, you know what? I had to tell this to a number, guys who are, CEOs, CFOs and stuff. I said, hey, look, you may know your field really well, but you don't know my field. And what works in your field ain't going to work in my field. So you know what? Let me do my job.
Yeah.
And I can say it in a very nice way. But and even today, oftentimes I'll travel with Jack or Will, my grandsons, and Brian, my son-in-law, will come along. And just recently, Brian said, well, do you mind if I come to with such and such a tournament? I go, no, dude, I love having you there because then he gets to be the parent. He gets to make sure they're doing their homework, they're eating and doing whatever they're supposed to be doing. And I'm handling the stuff on the court. He handles all the logistics. So I let him be the parent, and I'm the coach. And if there's something that I need to have a heart-to-heart with my grandsons about, but it's more about tennis, then I'll handle that. But then otherwise it's Brian and Linda. Those are their kids. They need to run the show, even if I may not agree with the parenting style or what's going on. That's their deal. So I think not crossing those lines is really important. And I think the other thing I'll say about parents is that if you're so worried about what court your kid is on, and you feel that your kid has to be with somebody that's better all the time, I think that's one of the biggest fallacies in tennis, and junior tennis in particular, because at the end of the day, if all you do is play against people that are better than you, you're never going to develop any skill, because you're not going to try anything, because you're going to get the ball knocked down your throat, right? So if you're trying to develop a skill, the best thing to do is to do it with somebody that's not as good as you, so you can keep working on that skill and still be competitive. And the fact that you're playing somebody that's not as accomplished as you gives you time to be able to do it.
Perfect. I love it. So Steve, now another kind of question. We talked a lot about, kind of life and whatnot with you. So what talent means to you? What's talent?
Talent?
Talent. Yeah. When you say, oh man, this guy's talented, what would you say?
Back in the day, there was, in the 1980s.
We're talking about player, right? We're talking about player.
Yeah. So Chuck Creasy was very involved. He was a coach at Clemson in the 1980s and very involved in the USTA. He would take the Junior Davis Cup team and things like that. And he had a great little saying. He said, "You can't put in what the good Lord left out," right? And so what I would say the talent is that innate ability to make things easy and to make things happen, right? And I would also say
we're talking about technical, we're talking about physical, we're talking about mental.
It's all of those things, right? So and again, if you think about different dimensions, right? Some players might be very gifted athletes, but they're poor tennis players because they don't have the right technique, right?
That's right.
And then other players have just natural smoothness and technique, but they may not be too good in the upper story, right? Yeah. And then you get other people like, well, and I'll give you an example. My grandson Jack and Robbie Weiss. These were two guys for whom the game just became easy, right? Yeah. Robbie Weiss was ranked top 10 in the country for 4 years in a row in the boys 12s. I mean, that's what a phenom he was, right? And my grandson Jack has very similar characteristics. I mean, both of those guys will move to the spot where the ball's going even before you hit it. They've got this radar, these eyes that just they just know where the ball's going. And then the other thing that Jack has that, well, I think Robbie had it too, but Jack may have a little bit more of it. I mean, Jack's eyes were not as good as Robbie's, but Jack has this ability to flip into a fifth gear when things get tough and finds a way to win the match. There are some players that inevitably will snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and then there's others that you can have them down 6-2, 5-2, and somehow you're not going to win the match. So that to me is a talent. It's something. It's a facility that you have that makes the game easier for you. That's just sort of innate.
Okay. Good. I love it.
Now that having been said, I will say that hard work beats talent, all day long. And if you look at a guy like Michael Jordan, there's the confluence of talent and work ethic, and you get a superstar.
Yeah. So now, Steve, now we're talking about, now we're trying to get a little more tennis oriented or technical. So do you train, when you're training Jack at this, or when you train Linda at the time, do you focus more on their strength, or you try to improve their weaknesses? What was
Strength, always about the strength, because and again, part of that is that I'm a naturally aggressive personality, so I'm always thinking offense, right? And so my approach to the game, even back in the '80s, was you got to pop the forehand and you got to whack the serve, because those are the two weapons in the game. The serve is the primary weapon, and then the forehand the secondary. And again, in the women's game, the serve is not as significant as it is in the men's game. But my approach was always, hey, wait a second, I want to play that ball early. I want to pop the forehand, and back in the '80s and the '90s, I would have had spent. I still spend time on transition, but I think the game in the '80s and '90s, as opposed to today, was different, and I think you were rewarded more for making net advances than you are today. One of the things that strikes me in watching Jack's matches today, and these are guys that are like, anywhere, like they're like top 100 in the world in the juniors, right?
Yes.
So these guys are fast tracking, to the pros, and even at this level, you could take what was a percentage approach shot. So imagine a shot that's sort of midway between the service line and the baseline, and between the center line and the sideline over there on the backhand side. You could take that shot, rip it cross court into the person's backhand, and come in and expect to win probably 2/3 of the point back in the day. In today's world, you're going to be lucky if you win 25% of those points, just because the balls, the courts, the strings, everything has changed. So today's game is more like one big baseline game. But again, that having been said, you still need offense and you need defense. So my approach to the game is good players do two things. One, they don't miss.
I know, I took that away from you.
Two,
every single time.
They take time away, right? And the way you take time away is you play the ball earlier in the bounce, and you flatten the trajectory, right? Now, if you want to go halfway and still hit more of a looping trajectory and play it early, I mean, you can certainly do that. But I think the real effective shot is to flatten the trajectory and play it early. That's how you're going to play offense. But that having been said, you got to play offense and defense.
Yeah. So I guess I like what you answer, but what I was asking you is this. So let's say Will. Let's say Will has a really good backhand, and let's say not such a good forehand. You focus more on improving what is not so good, or you focus on developing what it is good on him? So do you go? That's what I was trying to ask you. Because
I would say I'm going to work on the strength all day long, and I'm going to make the weakness as functional as I can. But I'm going to keep working on the strength.
You're going to go on the strength. You're going to go on
absolutely, because that's how you have to build the player's game. You got to build it around their strengths.
Okay, perfect. So how do you think that, let's say, Jack or Will or Linda, how do you do to keep them improving? What's the trick to keep a player improving? Or what do you think that is the trick? How do you make somebody to kind of constantly improve? What do you look at it to say, okay, I need to keep this guy improving? Do you change your training setting? How do you make them to keep improving? Do you know? Because
no, I was always the same old shit guy. I do the same to this day. I do a handful of things, but again, if you're an engaging personality and you can make it fun and you can apply some energy to it, because again, go back to the whole 10,000 hours, right? I mean, if something is breaking down under stress, I'm sorry, we just haven't hit enough balls, and I wish there were some magic formula or magic pill, but it isn't. It's just keep hitting balls until you get the damn thing in the court. I mean, and so and again, I think it's muscle memory. How do they train in the military, right? I mean, you do the same stuff over and over again. You break apart that rifle, put it back together, load it, take it up. I mean, and your life's going to depend on it, right? So you just keep doing it over and over until it becomes, second nature.
Okay. Now this one more of a personal question. When did you knew that you wanted to be a tennis coach? How do you knew? Do you know you wanted to be a tennis coach, or it was an accident that you jump into?
What's that?
So you're playing tennis, you're playing college tennis. When did you knew you said, you know what, I want to be a tennis coach? It was an accident. It was a summer job. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you find yourself there and say, you know what, I like this. Were you thinking to do that? Were you?
I wrote a Facebook post. I wrote a Facebook post recently, and at the end of it, I said, sometimes you don't choose tennis; it chooses you. Okay. And that's really the story of my life. I never ever planned on being a tennis pro. One of my college teammates, always wanted to own indoor clubs. And I thought, why would you want to do that? That's absolutely ridiculous. And so, when I graduated from college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And just serendipitously, the club, I was working at the TAM Tennis Club in Niles, and Rod Schroeder had come to that club in the fall of '77 after I'd graduated from school, and had a junior program, and I'd never been exposed to high level junior tennis before, and so I found out that I had an ability to work with kids, and I love tennis. And so, one thing just kind of led to another. But when I graduated from college, I never ever planned on being a tennis pro or owning clubs. And so I mean, the long story made short is just that I had a facility with kids. I did well with them. So then I thought, okay, well, I think I can have my own academy. And so I actually rented. I was a true independent contractor from the Lincolnshire Marriott. And then the program grew so big, I went to what is now College Park. It was courts on 22 in those days. And then that got big, and I moved out of there for one season to the TAM Tennis Club in Niles. And then I was able to buy the Libertyville Club in 1986. And then I found, well, geez, I kind of like running clubs. I kind of like doing both, right? Yeah. And so it was just one thing that led to another. I mean, it's so I tell people today, I said, life is it's like gin rummy, right? You have to play the hand that you're dealt, right? Okay. But you always have to keep your options open. And so that's the way I've lived my life. And I've sort of, when I felt energized, moving in a certain direction, that was the direction that I kind of headed. I just sort of followed my passion and my energy, and it's where I ended up. So.
Yeah, good. So now Jack is starting to get good, right? So now he's starting to probably be in a situation where he has pressure is going to start rising for him, in a sense that there is expectations. His own expectations.
Absolutely correct.
Right?
Yes.
Now it's not a game anymore. It's like, man, he wants to win.
You're right.
So how you manage that? How you manage that, or how you're trying to manage that?
Well, that's a really good question, because he did really well. In December, he won the Eddie Hurd tournament in the 16s. And then he got a wild card into the Orange Bowl and beat the 6th seed in the first round. And then he beat Jagger Leach, who was Lindsay Davenport's son. And so, he jumped up real high in the rankings. Then, the first two tournaments in, I think it was Costa Rica in January, he did pretty well. So then he jumped up to about 100 in the world. And so then, the target was, okay, well, let's see if we can qualify for the French Open. And so,
He did.
the
Is
last
he
2
on for the
weeks in
French Open?
Palm Springs, he didn't do as well. And afterwards I said, hey, so were you thinking about the French Open? He goes, yeah. And I said, hey, you know what? You got to forget that stuff. I mean, you got to play. No, he was thinking about he needed to do well in Palm Springs in California to get his ranking up high enough, right? So, he's 100 and he needed to be around, probably 80 or so. And so long story made short is he put too much pressure on himself. And I told him a story about his mother. I said, look, I never knew what the point totals were or what the prize money was. And I did that intentionally because I didn't want her to think that this was important. And I never talked about results. It was just one match at a time. Everybody's tough. And you got to love the game. You got to love the fight, and forget all the bullshit and all the stuff that surrounds the game, whether it's rankings or points or contracts or agents or any of that stuff. You got to wipe that. You got to be a player first. You got to wipe that stuff out of your mind because it'll kill you. Because now you're focused on a result. You're not really in the here and now.
Very good, very good. So now over the past 30 years, what do you think are the biggest changes in the game? What changed in the game in the past 30, 40 years? If there's any change besides the equipment, obviously the equipment changed, right? We know the equipment changed, but if you
absolutely. Well, I think the game today, there was a conscious effort in the 1990s to slow the game down because they did a study and they found out the ball was only in play like 12 minutes in the course of an hour at Wimbledon. And so that's when they made an effort to slow the game down. And now you've got the strings and the rackets. And so essentially the game has devolved into one big baseline game. So even if you look at the men's game, I would say probably 2/3 of the time after the guy serves, he's neutral, right? So what that means is, in the old days, you could hit a serve and either come in and volley or whack the next ball, and the guy was really on defense after the serve. It was very difficult to neutralize the server. And today, I mean, it's commonplace. So that's changed, I think, how the game is played. You can't come in as much as you once did. You got to work harder for the points. You got to be in great shape. And I think you have to do more with the ball. I was talking about, your idea of the head ball and loading it up. I think you got to be able to hit that ball, but then you also have to hit the attacking ball. And so it's very, it's like one big baseline game, and you got to play offense and defense, within that baseline game. So what worked, and interestingly enough, just a quick story. One year, Robbie Weiss played
Stefan Edberg,
Australian, Swedish player. What's that?
Stefan Edberg.
I'm having a senior moment. It was Edberg. Yes, exactly. He beat Edberg one year.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was Edberg. Excuse my senior moment there. So he made like 3 unforced errors in the first set and lost the set 6-2. Right. So that gave you an indication as to what the game was in the 1990s. I think if Robbie were playing today, he would probably be between 30 and 50, easy, and he would have stayed there because he was a great baseliner, and so the guys like Edberg, I don't think would have been as successful in today's game as they were in their respective eras.
Well,
And,
right, yeah, that
it,
flatter forehand, it will be tough with that.
exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
So now I'm gonna take you back. I'm gonna take you back, you as a player, because I think, me as a coach, I think I tried to develop what I didn't have as a player.
Yep.
I think it's almost like I went after what I didn't have as a player, you know. So I was wondering, when you were playing, what was the thing that you were missing as a player?
Everything.
Because I think
No,
where it
I
lies
mean,
in compensation. You know what I mean? Honestly, I think I honestly I just think,
no,
you know. So I'm just curious to see you as a player.
I,
What thing feel that you didn't have? You love the game. You
I,
you travel. What was you know?
I would say the same thing as you. I really focused in on what I didn't have, and that's the ground strokes. So if you look at Linda's game, Linda's game is really the opposite of my game, because I couldn't hit a ground stroke to save my life, and I had a good serve, a good overhead, once in a while volley, and so I just made Linda just a great attacking ground stroker, and I didn't spend much time on her serve because in those days, this was she played probably 87 to 2000, but I would say from 87 to 97, the serve in the women's game just wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, the serves were pathetic, so just had her spin it in. It didn't really work on developing her serve at all. Even though I had a good serve and I had elaborate. I mean, I was really a good tactical server, because you had to be, because that was how you're going to be able to make the volley. And so I just taught her to do what I couldn't do. I mean, she had a great backhand. I had no backhand, and she could really smack the forehand. I did teach her to hit volleys and overheads, though. I mean, she had pretty good volleys and overheads.
Yeah.
And she had a good
Hey, Steve,
slice
you
backhand.
tell me, hey, one thing. You tell me when you want to stop. I'm enjoying it, man. I'm listening to you. I love every.
That's fine.
So you tell me. I mean, I have several more questions, but you tell me. I don't want you to kind of, when you want to stop, you
No,
tell me.
that's fine. No.
Because I
No,
mean, I
go ahead.
love it, and honestly, Steve, the reason when we were talking, and I said to you in the beginning why I wanted to do this, because I think people need to hear a lot of good stuff, and I think you have to ask good questions for people to say good stuff. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes, I see a lot of interviews, but I don't think sometimes people ask the questions, that will give you something. And I think parents or coaches will learn a lot from this. I mean, what you're saying, I think is phenomenal. Anyway, so a lot of people talk
Great.
about the warm up. What's the warm up for you? When Jack goes to play or Linda was going to play, what was the warm up? What do you do? A lot of people do a lot of warm up. What's your take on warm up?
Well, I'm decidedly very unscientific when it comes to the warm up, and I'm sure that USTA coaches would shudder at my answer. But I once heard Jim Laird talk about the warm up, or maybe it was Jack Groppel, one of the two. The human body is like a stick of butter, right? And as soon as you heat the butter up, it becomes liquid, right? And so my idea of the warm up was always I just wanted to get my body temperature up to get it into the liquid state, right? And although I was never, I have an appreciation for fitness, but I don't have the same passion that I have for tennis. And so I think the dynamic workouts that the kids are doing and the bands they're bringing to the court are all really great. So I'm probably, as I said earlier, you have to know what you don't know, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that, the warm up and the dynamic and all this stuff. I mean, I've studied it back. Bob Guido was probably the first guy to come up with the idea of a dynamic warm up back in the 1980s. So I've always had an appreciation for this and an understanding of it, but not really a passion for it. So, I'm all about getting out there and hitting balls. But I mean, Jack will get to the court, a half an hour early, to do all of his warm up exercises and things. And I think it's great. And it's not something that would necessarily come from me. And I think that's why, having a team approach, especially with what the USTA is doing now is really helpful.
So, okay. What is success means to you? What success means to you? Because I think you're very successful.
Great question.
Business-wise and coaching-wise. I mean, I think you have done a lot of really good things. I mean, and you have your band, that you play, and you run your
Rockstar. That's right.
You do a little bit of everything. You're a double guy. Fuck, man, how this guy has so much time to do everything? So you know what I mean? So what success means to you? Because you definitely have a drive, big time. I know you do. So
well, I think there was a guy that wrote a book years ago, Stephen Covey. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, I read it.
And one of his 7 habits is begin with the end in mind, right? And so if you think about your life, if you begin with the end in mind, and then you work backwards, and you say, okay, well, after I've spent my 70, 80, hopefully 90 years on the planet, what do I want? What's the vision? What do I want my life to look like, right? And I think that's different for everybody, because we're wired up differently. So for me, it was always finding a passion and moving towards that passion, and then developing my talent to its fullest, so that my potential might be here, but my performance is kind of up here. So I was trying to get to be as good as I could be, and not really comparing myself to anybody else. Fully realizing that there are people that are phenomenally more successful, and not getting crazy about it, because everybody has to run their own race. And so to me, it was just living life on my own terms. I realized, and following my passion. So when it's time for me, in my own theological view, that was another one of my passions. If I have to stand before a holy God, and he asks me, what did you do with your time, treasure, and talent? I can make a reasonable answer to that. So again, it's that whole idea of beginning with the end in mind, but then moving towards your passion, because so many people might be good at something, but it doesn't release energy in them. I mean, it's just a grind, and their whole life becomes a grind. And it's like, shit. I mean, tomorrow's not guaranteed to anybody. So I mean, you got to make the best of every day. A very good friend of mine, Jeff Tabin, who I played junior tennis with, fascinating guy, ophthalmologist, teaches at Stanford, played for Yale, medical school at Harvard, and world-renowned ophthalmologist. And he summited all 4 peaks, K2 and Everest and the rest of them. And a good friend of his, my age, who actually did all the camera work for the movie Everest, because he was a climber and a videographer. They found him dead in his house the other day. I mean, this guy was in great shape, and wow. Point being that you never know when your number is going to be called. It could be tomorrow. So I think we have to live our lives, as if every day's your last day.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Steve, another question, kind of different, probably never asked. Somebody asked you, what would you say to the 20-year-old Steve? what would you say to the 20-year-old Steve Watt? You know, you were 20 now. What would you say to him? You know, now you're like 55, you know, what would you tell him? You know, you run by him. You run by him, you see him, and you remember how you were. What would you tell to him? You know, that's just like, yeah. What would you say to him? Yeah. You know,
don't be quite, I would say, don't be quite such a smart ass. Because you know, when I was younger, I had like had this sarcastic edge to me. I would say, don't be, continue to be a smart ass, but don't be such a big smart ass. And then I would probably say, learn to be more of a 20-mile marcher. You know, there's in the book Good to Great. The author is a Stanford professor, and he gives he tells the story of it was Amundsen and one other Arctic explorer, and you know they were both seeing who could get to the South Pole the first, and one guy would just come hell or high water would march 20 miles. It didn't matter, and the other guy would stay in his tent for a week, and then he'd go 100 miles, and then he was very erratic, right? And so I think that 20-mile marching, you know, being able to facilitate as many good habits as you can, and learn to be more of a 20-mile marcher. It's not my natural temperament, but I think it's something that is very helpful in a lot of areas of life.
You're saying take your time. You're saying that. You'll say
no. What I'm saying is do the shit you don't want to do on a regular basis. I have a tendency to put things off that I don't want to do.
Okay.
Then you make a mountain out of a molehill, and you don't have to do that. You know, it's sort of in the flow of everyday life. We all have things we don't want to do. We have things that take energy from us. So I think you need the discipline to say, look, I'm going to do X amount of that stuff each on a regular basis.
Okay. All right. And I would say that's it, man. I don't think I have anything else.
Okay.
Anyway, man, Steve, thank you, man. I think this was really good. I think a lot of people should learn a lot from what you said today.
Great.
I enjoy, man. And thank you for helping me out.